Philip the Arab was one of the few 3rd-century Roman emperors sympathetic to Christians, although his relationship with Christianity is obscure and controversial. Philip was born in Auranitis, an Arab district east of the Sea of Galilee. The urban and Hellenized centers of the region were Christianized in the early years of the 3rd century via major Christian centers at Bosra and Edessa. There is little evidence of Christian presence in the small villages of the region in this period, such as Philip's birthplace at Philippopolis. Philip served as Praetorian prefect, commander of the Praetorian Guard, from 242. He was made emperor in 244. In 249, after a brief civil war, he died at the hands of his successor, Decius. During the late 3rd century and into the 4th, it was held by some churchmen that Philip had been the first Christian emperor. He was described as such in Jerome's Chronicon, which was well known during the Middle Ages, and in Orosius's highly popular Historia Adversus Paganos. Most scholars hold that these and other early accounts are ultimately derived from Eusebius of Caesarea's Historia Ecclesiastica. The most important section of Eusebius's Historia on Philip's religious beliefs describes the emperor's visit to a church on Easter Eve when he was denied entry by the presiding bishop until he confessed his sins. The account is paralleled by Chrysostom's homily, which celebrates St. Babylas, bishop of Antioch, for denying a sinful emperor entry to his church, and quotations of Leontius in the Chronicon Paschal which describe Philip seeking penitence from Babylas from the sin of murdering his predecessor. Given the parallels between the accounts, most scholars believe that Eusebius, Chrysostom, and Leontius are referring to the same event. With the growth of scholarly criticism in the 17th and 18th centuries, fewer historians believed Philip to be a Christian. Historians had become increasingly aware of secular texts, which did not describe Philip as a Christian, and which, indeed, recorded him participating as Pontifex Maximus over the millennial secular games in 248. Modern scholars are divided on the issue. Some, like Hans Paul Sander and Ernst Stein, argue that the ecclesiastic narratives are ambiguous, based on oral rumor, and do not vouch for a Christian Philip. Others, like John York, Irfan Shahid, and Warwick Ball, argue that the ecclesiastic narratives are clear and dependable enough that Philip can be described as a Christian. Still others, like Glenn Bosock, argue that the sources are strong enough to describe Philip as a man interested in and sympathetic to Christianity, but not strong enough to call him a Christian. Background. Biography of Philip the Arab. Philip was born in a village in Auranitis, part of the district of Trachonitis, east of the Sea of Galilee in Palestine. Philip renamed the village Philippopolis during his reign as emperor. He was one of only 3 Easterners to be made emperor before the decisive separation of East and West in 395. Even among Easterners, Philip was atypical, as he was an Arab, not a Greek. His father was Julius Marinus. Nothing besides his name is known, but the name indicates that he held Roman citizenship and that he must have been prominent in his community. The early details of Philip's career are obscure, but his brother, Gaius Julius Priscus, was made Praetorian prefect under Emperor Gordian III. If a fragmentary inscription refers to Priscus, he would have moved through several equestrian offices during Gordian's reign. In the spring of 242, Philip himself was made Praetorian prefect, most likely with the help of his brother, following a failed campaign against Persia in the winter of 243–44. Gordian died in camp. Rumors that Philip had murdered him were taken up by the senatorial opposition of the later 3rd century, and survive in the Latin histories and epitomes of the period. Philip was acclaimed emperor, and was secure in the title by late winter 244. Philip made his brother rector Auranitis an executive position with extraordinary powers, including command of the armies in the eastern provinces. Philip began his reign by negotiating a peaceful end to his predecessor's war against Persia. In 248, Philip called the secular games to celebrate the 1,000-year anniversary of the founding of Rome. In the Near East, Philip's brother Priscus's tax collection methods provoked the revolt of Jotarpinus. At the same time, Silvanicus started a rebellion in the Rhenish provinces. He faced a third rebellion in 248 when the legions he had used in successful campaigns against the Carpi on the Danubian frontier revolted and proclaimed an officer named Pacatinus emperor. All three rebellions were suppressed quickly. In 249, to restore order after the defeat of Pacatinus, Philip gave Senator Decius, a native of the region, command of the Danubian armies. In late spring 249, the armies proclaimed Decius emperor. The civil war that followed ended in a battle outside Verona. Decius emerged victorious, and Philip either died or was assassinated. When news of Philip's death reached Rome, the Praetorian Guard murdered his son and successor Marcus Julius Severus Philippus. Christianity and Philip's early life and career. No account or allusion to Philip's presumed conversion to Christianity survives. The Byzantinist and Arabist Irfan Shahid, who argues in favor of Philip's Christianity in Rome and the Arabs, assumes that he had been a Christian before becoming emperor. He argues, therefore, that there is no need to explain the absence of evidence for Philip's conversion in contemporary Christian literature. Auranitis, equidistant from Antioch in the north and Bosra in the south, and sited on a road connecting the two, could have been Christianized from either direction. Even if he was not himself Christian, Philip would probably have been familiar with Christians in his hometown as well as Bosra and other nearby settlements. Hans Poelsander, a classicist and historian arguing against accounts of Philip's Christianity, allows that Philip may have been curious about a religion which had its origins in an area so close to his place of birth, as an Eastern provincial rather than an Italian. He may not have been so intense in his commitment to the traditional Roman religion that he could not keep an open mind on other religions. Quote, he also accepts that Philippopolis probably contained a Christian congregation during Philip's childhood. For the scholar of religion Frank Trombley, however, the absence of evidence for the early Christianization of Philippopolis makes Shahid's assumption that Philip was Christian from early childhood unmerited. If Philip had been a Christian during his military service, he would have not been a particularly unusual figure for his era, although membership in the army was prohibited by certain churchmen, and would have required participation in rites some Christians found sacrilegious. It was not uncommon among the Christian laity. The position of an emperor, however, was more explicitly pagan. Emperors were expected to officiate over public rites and lead the religious ceremonies of the army. Christian scripture contains explicit prohibitions on this sort of behavior, such as the first commandment, "You shall have no other gods before me." Whatever the prohibitions, people raised on the more tolerant Christianity of the camp would have been able to justify participation in pagan ritual to themselves. We know that these people exist. The historical record includes Christian army officers who would have been regularly guilty of idolatry, and the military martyrs of the late 3rd century. The ritual sacrifice excluded them from certain parts of the Christian community, but these people nonetheless believed themselves to be Christian, and were recognized by others as Christians. Christianity in Auranitis, thanks to its proximity to the first Christian communities of Palestine. Provincia Arabia, of which Philippopolis was a part, was among the first regions to convert to Christianity. By the time of Philip's birth, the region had been extensively Christianized, especially in the north and in Hellenized settlements like those of Auranitis. The region is known to have had a fully developed synodal system by the mid-3rd century. The region sent 6 bishops to the Council of Nicaea in 325, and Eusebius's Onomasticon, a gazetteer of biblical place names, records a holy Christian village called Kiriathame, or Kiriatha, near Madaba, outside of the cities. However, there is less evidence of Christianization. Before the 5th century, there is little evidence of the faith, and many villages remained unconverted in the 6th. Philippopolis, which was a small village for most of this period, does not have a Christian inscription that can be dated earlier than 552. It is not known when the village established a prelateship, but it must have been sometime before 451, when it sent a bishop to the Council of Chalcedon. Christian beliefs were present in the region's Arab community since about AD 200, when Abgar VIII, an ethnic Arabian king of the Roman client-state Bosra, converted to Christianity. The religion was propagated from Abgar's capital at Edessa until its destruction in 244. By the mid-3rd century, the city of Bosra had a Christian bishop, Barillos. Barillos offers an early example of the heretical beliefs Hellenic Christians imputed to the Arabs as a race. Barillos believed that Christ did not exist before he was made flesh at the Incarnation. According to Eusebius of Caesarea, his views were condemned as heresy following debate at a local synod. The debate was most likely conducted in Greek, a language in common use among the well-Hellenized cities of the region. Christianity in the mid-3rd century. The 3rd century was the age in which the initiative for persecution shifted from the masses to the imperial office. In the 1st and 2nd centuries, persecutions were carried out under the authority of local government officials. Septimius Severus and Maximin are alleged to have issued general rescripts against the religion and targeted its clergy, but the evidence for their acts is obscure and contested. There is no evidence that Philip effected any changes to the Christians' legal status. Pogroms against the Christians in Alexandria took place while Philip was still emperor. There is no evidence that Philip punished, participated in or assisted the pogrom. No historian contests that Philip's successor Decius called a general persecution against the church, and most would list it as the first. Decius was anxious to secure himself in the imperial office. Before mid-December 249, Decius issued an edict demanding that all Romans throughout the empire make a show of sacrifice to the gods. Libelli were signed in Fayum in June and July 250 as demonstrations of this sacrifice. If the persecutions of Maximin and Septimius Severus are dismissed as fiction, Decius's edict was without precedent. If the Christians were believed to be Philip's friends, however, it might help explain Decius's motivations.